6 months passed in an irritating blur as Krista tried to get her feet under her. The first few weeks had been the worst. Her father's funeral had been scheduled 2 days after she was released from the hospital. Krista hadn't fully accepted his death until she saw the flowers and black casket. Krista felt the weight of his murder. Could she have prevented it? Could she have stopped the violence before it escalated to murder? What if she'd been more honest with her family or stood up to Christian? What if she had run away, left him, or divorced him? Would it still have happened? Would her father be alive? Would she be dead? To survive under the guilt that suffocated her, Krista had made it her responsibility to see Christian brought to justice. True to her word, she had spent every Monday rehashing the same agonizing phone conversation with Becky Shandon, the receptionist at the police station. Becky always responded the same, and Krista could recite the tiring speech verbatim. Today was no different. "Can I speak to Detective Jonathan Weiss?" Krista asked. Becky launched in before Krista identified herself. "Mrs. Adams, as I told you the last time, as soon as there are any leads on your case, the detective in charge of the investigation will contact you." "So you've said," Krista replied just as pleasantly. This conversation always tested her patience. She mentally worked to hold her agitation in check. "That's not good enough." "Ma'am, I don't know what else to tell you," Becky responded. Krista sighed. "You don't have to tell me anything. Just transfer me to Detective Weiss." Becky smacked her lips. "Hold, please." "Thank you." Krista relaxed her grip on the phone. Brenda sat on the opposite side of the couch with her feet curled under her and an open book on her stomach. The pages fell against her chest as her curious gaze met Krista over a pair of blue reading glasses. "They put me on hold," Krista said. Brenda nodded. "I see." Krista stared at her mother as Brenda lowered her eyes back to the book, an old Stephen King paperback. The cover was folded nearly in half, and the spine had thick white streaks where activity had worn the picture away. Krista kept the cell phone to her ear. She listened to the soft beeps that occasionally cut through the silence to remind her that she was still on hold. She lowered her eyes to the floor. Alexis played with a stuffed pink horse as she amused herself. The horse was new, a present from her grandmother a little over a month ago. A smile crept to her cheek as Krista watched her daughter play. In the last 6 months, Krista had stopped worrying about upsetting anyone who might throw a fist at her. In her mother's house, she didn't have to protect Alexis from Christian. She hadn't run to the store in a scared frenzy, afraid someone might kill her if they ran out of ragu spaghetti sauce. Living with her mother had not been an easy decision. In the end, Krista decided it would be better for Alexis to have a stable household, something Krista simply couldn't provide on her own. A couple of days after her father's funeral and 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, her mother had rented a moving truck. Together, they had packed, moved, and unpacked Krista's belongings into her mother's condo on the edge of Midtown. It had 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. It was much nicer than her old rundown apartment in Queens. "This is Detective Weiss." The masculine voice broke through her reverie. Krista sat up on the couch. "Yes, hello, this is Krista Adams." "I know," he said through a sigh. "How are you this evening?" "I'm fine, but I'd be doing even better if you gave me some good news," she said. "Mrs. Adams, we've been through this. What did I tell you the last time you called?" Krista frowned. "It's been 6 months. "We've got people who have worked on cases for 6 years, he reasoned. "Murders don't solve themselves, and most of the time, the people who commit them hide because they know we're looking for them. Now, what did I tell you the last time you called? You'd call me as soon as you knew anything." Out of the corner of her eye, Krista watched her mother's gaze slowly drift upward from her horror novel. Detective Weiss continued. "Did I call you, Mrs. Adams?" "No, but I was hoping." She started. "No, I didn't," he said, cutting her off. "Therefore, one could only assume I have no new information concerning your father's murder or the whereabouts of your missing husband." "Maybe if?" Krista tried again. "Listen to me," Weiss said. "Sit at home, relax, go to the movies, take a ride on the ferry, take up a hobby, or go on vacation. I don't care what you do to take your mind off this case, but do something. Just quit calling the station and let us do our job. I promise I will call the minute my team finds out anything." "I don't like waiting. Krista said. Nobody does. I'm sorry, but right now there are no new leads in your case, he explained with a touch of pity in his words. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Weiss asked. Yes, I understand, she mumbled. Goodbye, Mrs. Adams. Krista clenched her teeth. Goodbye. She ended the call and tossed the phone on the coffee table with such force it slid across the polished wood and landed on the floor next to Alexis. Brenda marked the page, closed the novel, and laid it on the cushion. Good news? They won't tell me anything, Krista answered. Why should they? Her mother asked. Why shouldn't they? Krista shot back. I'm entitled to the truth. Brenda looked like she wanted to laugh. What makes you think they're lying? What makes you think they're telling the truth? She countered. My God, child, she breathed as she pushed herself off the couch. You're impossible. Krista jumped off the couch and followed her mother into the kitchen. Why am I being impossible? I don't understand why just because someone slapped a badge on some fool's chest, all of a sudden everything he says is written in stone. Brenda closed the refrigerator and turned to her daughter. I didn't say that. You're looking for an answer that simply isn't there. It doesn't mean someone is keeping it from you. She drew a slow breath. It just isn't there. Well, that's not good enough, Krista retorted. I want him found. I want him caught. I want him to rot in prison for the rest of his life. I don't want to wait until the police are ready to get off their asses and go find him. Krista, her mother said the name quickly. It was a warning that her daughter's tone had just about crossed the line. You can't expect the police to drop everything and focus only on the search for Christian. No, but I can expect them to do their job. Krista leaned back against the countertop. This so-called investigation is nothing but a joke. If Detective Weiss and his investigators were out looking for Christian, like they should be, someone would know something by now. I think you're overreacting, Brenda countered. For all you know, his investigators are out searching for new leads right now. Somehow I doubt that, Krista said. What are you so worried about? Brenda asked. He's still out there, Krista answered. What if he comes looking for Alexis? If Christian isn't found, he'll come back. You don't know that, Brenda reasoned. You don't know him, Krista mumbled. She pushed away from the counter. Her mother didn't understand the danger. If the police don't find him and he does come back, then it will be too late. Brenda reached under the stove and pulled out a pan. What are you going to do? Start looking for him yourself? He's not going to be found any faster with you hounding the police every other day. She pointed to the pantry. Get out the potatoes. Krista considered her mother's words as she walked to the pantry. She got out the box of potato flakes and set it on the counter next to the stove. Somebody in this city has to know where Christian is. Brenda shrugged as she grabbed the box. Okay, who knows? Where is this person? I don't know, Krista admitted. Brenda pointed the box at Krista to emphasize her point. Exactly, that's police work, and you're not a cop. Let Detective Weiss do his job, and you stay here and take care of your child. That's your job. Her mother flipped the box over to read the cooking measurements. How? Krista argued. How will Alexis ever be safe with Christian out there? He won't come around here, her mother said. She filled the pan with 1.5 cups of water. He'd get caught. Go pick out a vegetable. Krista rolled her eyes as she opened the freezer. She pulled out the first bag her hand touched. Frozen green beans turned out to be the lucky choice. Her mother took out a smaller pan and added a slice of butter. Krista placed the beans on the counter and hit the bag with the bottom of her fist. Brenda cut her eyes to her and frowned. Krista shrugged. What? They need to be broken up before they'll fit in the pan. Brenda groaned. Despite the look, Krista wasn't ready to back down. He doesn't have to come here. He could hide at Riverside Park or sit on a bench in Central Park. He could wait for me to pass him on Broadway. He could sit outside Alexis's school and grab her before she gets on the bus. Brenda turned the burner on high. Well, I don't know what to tell you. Unless you can afford a personal bodyguard, I suggest you keep an eye on her. Krista balled her fist around the bag of frozen green beans. Her mother's hand closed over hers. Listen, I know you're scared. Life is full of people who are going to try to hurt you or Lexi. I am worried that Christian will show up too, but we can't live in fear. We have to live vigilantly. Fear is not healthy and will eventually cripple you. Lexi shouldn't see her mother like that. The detective will find Christian. You have to believe that. Do you understand? Krista's emotions got the best of her, and she slammed her other hand on the counter. That isn't enough. It stung and shot a jolt halfway up her arm. The loud smack was enough to make her mother jump. Brenda glared, the potato box raised in her hand as if she fought an internal struggle to launch it at Krista. If you do that again, Christian will be the least of your worries, she stated. Krista stormed out of the kitchen. If she continued to talk to her mother, they would end up in a screaming match. She'd still be no closer to finding Christian. As Krista passed through the living room, she snatched her jacket off the back of the couch. Brenda poked her head around the kitchen wall. Where are you going? Krista put on her shoes. For a walk. It's getting kind of late to be out wandering the streets, Brenda warned. As she tied the lace, she met a questioning look in Alexis's eyes. I'll be back, Lexi. Alexis simply offered a slow nod and went back to playing. Krista stood and looked around with a final air of defiance. Taking a walk was more of a spur-of-the-moment decision. She didn't know what time it was and hadn't considered the daylight had all but disappeared. She didn't want to leave, but her pride refused to let her change her mind. Krista thrust her arms into the sleeves of her black jacket and caught a brief glimpse of her mother's disapproving glare as she left the apartment.